The black nerd used to be defined by this guy.
Can I do that?
Oh, today Steve Urkel is so passé. Today's black nerd is certainly no Urkel. He or she is now a blurred. Even the word is hip, right? And so are the names who proudly carry the title.
Strange, specific stuff. That's what makes a nerd. If you like strange, specific stuff, that's a nerd, okay? Kanye West is a black nerd. He likes strange, specific stuff. If you go up to Kanye West and say, hey, what are your favorite things? He'll be like, robots and teddy bears. That's a nerd.
Joining me now is Eric Deggans, self-proclaimed blurred, Tampa Bay Times TV and media critic, and author of the new book, Race Baiter, How the Media Wields Dangerous Words to Divide a Nation. Welcome, Eric.
Thanks for having me.
So you're a proud blurred.
Very much so.
Tell us what that means.
Well, for me, I guess it just means that I'm into a lot of nerdy stuff that maybe people wouldn't expect me to be into. When I was a kid, I passed the time by reading astronomy books, and I was into Star Trek and Star Wars and all that stuff. And now, as an adult, I still collect comic books, although I call them graphic novels now. Thank you very much. And, don't ask my wife and kids how many times I've watched the Avengers movie on my Blu-ray at home. Oh. So I freely admit that I'm into a lot of nerdy stuff, and that it may make me seem like a geek to some, but I wear that flag proudly.
You just sound just like my husband. So when you were a kid, could you proudly come out and say, I'm a nerd?
I think it was harder to find role models in pop culture, especially African Americans, who were nerdy but also were cool. There were some, and I'm not trying to say, I've done pieces on this for National Public Radio and for the Tampa Bay Times, and I'm not suggesting that the black nerd got invented with Steve Urkel or even got invented now. But I do think that a worm has turned a little bit in pop culture, and we're at a point where you can look at pop music, you can look at TV and film, you can look at novels, and you can see black nerds just excelling without having to disguise their nerddom, which I just think is wonderful.
Why did black nerds have to disguise their nerdiness in the past? Explain that to us.
Well, in my own case, in my own neighborhood, I disguised my nerdiness because I didn't want to get beat up. But I think we've reached a point where nerdiness, some aspects of nerdiness are considered cooler. It's okay to be into comic books, for example. When I was a kid, if you were 20 years old and 25 years old and still reading comic books, people looked at you funny. But when you have $500 million films based on comic books, people are a little more willing to accept that maybe there's some value in reading those books beyond a severe case of Arrested Development.
Okay, so should I take it deep and say, how does this help the African American community now that blurs are accepted and are hip?
Well, and again, I just want to make the point that we've always had black intellectuals who have been considered hip. I mean, if you look back to Malcolm X, you could even make an argument that, guys in that era, James Baldwin, black intellectuals that were certainly considered hip. But I do think it gives people a little more room to be themselves. It relieves them from maybe the straitjackets of certain roles that maybe you're expected to fulfill. And it just allows you to aspire to be something different. I mean, one of the things, and Donald Glover said it in the clip that you played, one of the things that's cool about being a nerd is that you just get to be yourself without being called weird, without being ostracized, maybe having that be valued. So I look at a music nerd like Questlove from The Roots. This is a guy who's so into old music, and he digs through old records, and he turns them into new hits. And all of a sudden, that's really cool. So, when I was a kid, having a record collection that was 30 years old might be considered kind of strange, but now, it's considered something cool, and it leads to advances in pop music, and I think that's a wonderful thing.
Great. Well, thanks for being with us in all your nerdiness.